Good evening, Azure Hills Church. It's so great that we can get together online tonight. We want to be able to take some time to answer some questions about our reopen process. We've been in a step-by-step process throughout these last few weeks, especially. And so we want to share that plan and process for returning to in-person worship services at Azure Hills. As many of you are aware, our Azure Hills Church is a part of the larger organization of Adventist congregations. We're a part of Southeastern California Conference, and the conference has been so helpful in providing guidelines that each church follows in this process. This whole situation has been constantly changing and evolving, and our congregation has been navigating this together. We've been very grateful for the leadership of Arthur Balinci, who's our chairperson for our board, and he's also chaired this task force for the reopen process. He's a risk management specialist, and he's been lending that expertise. We've been grateful for Dr. Ingrid Bloomquist, who's an elder here and an infectious disease specialist, Nate Garcia, a deacon and also first responder, Dr. Shirley Tan Inyo, a doctor and an elder at Azure Hills, and Chris Johnston, an elder and an attorney and very involved in our children's ministry. Anna Nelson is a parent and a public health specialist, and she has been lending that expertise. And then from our pastoral team, we have Pastor Starla Stefan Leno, who's our pastor for member care and integration, and Pastor Trevin Osborne, who is in charge of our facilities as executive pastor and manages those facilities really well. Myself, along with this team, has been working really hard to plan and navigate this so that we are able to bring to you this information that was just voted last week by our board. Many of you watched the video that we shared this last Sabbath following the service, but I'll recap some of the big highlights for what's changing in this process as we come back to in-person worship in light of COVID-19. And then you can ask any questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat so that we can answer those questions together. We have this overview that I'd like to take you on. We are in phase 1 of 4 phases that we walk through together in this process of coming back together as a church, but it's very different than what we will remember it as, especially as such a warm and friendly and huggy and handshake church. It's very different for us. So first of all, we're really trying to minimize the time in confined spaces with other people. We will wear face masks with covering nose and mouth at all times, observing a 6-foot social distance, which is probably our hardest and biggest challenge, washing and sanitizing our hands regularly, screening attendees so that people who are sick don't participate, limiting the touching of surfaces and disinfecting everything regularly, and especially encouraging at-risk groups to stay home or to be extra careful. During this time, as California has reopened for this 21-day trial period, our size is limited to 100 participants. That includes all volunteers and people participating in the service. And the length of our time for our service is limited to 1 hour. Our task force also and our board has voted a 2-hour break in between planned gatherings so that we have time to clean and sanitize. All attendees will RSVP as they come in and be screened and temperature checked. And then we will seat people in the space so that we can make sure that everyone has appropriate distance. Another big one for us is that there's no congregational singing, no physical contact, no food of any kind, and that we really at this time are not able to do special programs for minors, but we are showing that kind of love and interest in their growth and development all virtually this time. So this summer it's going to be a huge ministry online for our kids, but nothing for them exclusively in person during this summer. So that's some of the overview of what we're looking at. We did vote as a church these main points during the church board meeting this last Wednesday. First of all, we will stay online. Some of you have been very concerned that you not lose that connection because you have been staying online and you want to remain there. We will be doing that. Our quality will remain online. We want to encourage outdoor experiences with masks and social distancing. Outdoor space is the place to be during the summer. It's the safest spot. And then we want to encourage you to meet together in smaller groups, even on our campus outside, in the parking lots, on the lawns, to make those arrangements so that we can make sure that those groups can be accommodated on our church.
All right, I think Pastor Tara has frozen up here. So I will pick up where she left off. As she was mentioning, we have the 7 principles which she shared that every in-person gathering is going to abide by. And then what we are encouraging people to do in the meantime, while we're getting all the logistics taken care of, because obviously, as you've heard those 7 principles, things will look very different. And so in the meantime, what we're encouraging this summer is for groups to gather, smaller groups to gather outside. That's the safest place to gather, is outside. And so we've opened up our, the parking lot, the grassy area and back behind the fellowship hall. If you have a group you'd like to meet together, you're welcome to do that out there. We are working hard towards getting the facility itself where it needs to be. As I'm sure you've seen from the toilet paper rush, for your personal use, there's been a rush on supplies for cleaning, for hand sanitizer, just for all the things we need to get together and in order for us to be able to have these services clean, disinfect in between services, and just make sure everything's healthy and safe. So we're working hard on kind of working through all those logistics. So in the meantime, what we're hoping people do is that you gather together in smaller groups. It's safest outside. So that's really what we're encouraging, still following those key principles: wear your face mask, stay 6 feet apart, those sorts of things. But we encourage you to do that in the meantime, because we know so many people have been missing their friends from church. So we would just encourage you to continue to, or to do that. You can also reach out if you would like to do something in the fellowship hall in person. And so you can contact me, email me, and in a few weeks, we'll probably be ready to be able to do that, and maybe do some in-person gatherings inside, a small group, a Bible study, maybe a Sabbath school class, something of that variety. In a few weeks, we'll probably be ready to do that inside. I think you're back, Pastor Tara. I didn't mention sort of the board decision about timing for larger gatherings. You want to pick up there?
Oh, wow. My internet must have frozen a long time ago.
Yes, it did. So
I'm so glad I kept going with all of that information. So glad to see you all online. And our touching bases together as a church board will be June 29th, when we'll touch bases back about gathering again. And we will let you know from that point. I'm not sure when the internet stopped, Pastor Trevin. What did you last hear before everything died out?
I'm trying to remember. I think I picked up where you left off in terms of the outside gatherings.
Okay, perfect.
Trying to encourage people, do stuff outside and do the principles still, but gathering outside is safest during this time.
Okay, perfect. I see a question from James. You mentioned, are there different phases for churches? Isn't California in the 3rd phase right now? And that is true. Our Southeastern California Conference has 4 phases for us re-entering back towards normal, I guess we could say. But we aren't following, it's not the same as the California state reopen. Good question, Christina said. Is there any, Arthur or Pastor Trevin, do you want to speak to that also?
Yeah, just, like Pastor Tara said, the state of California had their phases. And so the Southeastern California Conference said, once California does the 3rd phase, which is when we can have these gatherings, here's where now the conference phasing begins. So we're in phase 1 of now the conference approach. But I think it's important to remember, as Pastor Tara mentioned, that the state of California here, I think next week, right, Arthur, we're going to be next week where they're going to reevaluate and decide if we can continue to be open or if the size limits will change or some of those variables. I don't know if you want to speak to that, Arthur.
Well, I think you may have even seen on the news that the Cathedral of Angels in downtown LA reopened this past Sunday for Mass. And they only had 100 people. They had somebody at the door, and when the 100 came, they said, that's it for this service. So all the churches in California are really waiting to see what is the state of California going to say at the end of the 21-day period, which I believe is next Monday. I believe is when the 21 days, they're supposed to announce if they're changing or reevaluating anything at that time. So even some of the largest churches are all trying to fit within the 100 people model.
Which for us is just such a small amount for the size church that we have.
Yeah, I would just also add, with the 6-foot distancing, even our fellowship hall and the sanctuary, it gets small very quickly. So we're still kind of working out logistics. And in the fellowship hall, we've sort of done a setup, a sort of a scenario with 100 chairs, and it almost fills the entire fellowship hall. So even if they allow for larger gatherings, we still have to do the 6-foot distancing. So we're still going to have to work within that variable. So we're still trying to figure out sort of the best configuration to try and maximize the space so we can get past the 100. But our space is limited just based on, especially the sanctuary with the pews, the way they're set up. Fellowship hall, obviously we have more flexibility, but we're still going to need to do that 6-foot distancing. So even if we can go more than 100, it's not like we're going to be able to accommodate that in our spaces with that 6-foot distancing. So we're going to have to sort of play around with that a little bit whenever we do meet again.
So some have been joking, are you ready for your 18 worship services to be able to accommodate everyone? But, we're just not there. This is the season for small group garden church gatherings for people to be outside. You ask a really good question, Danette. If we can't sing or have the church open for kids gatherings, do you think it's even worth it to be open? It really, we've been asking the why question a lot. The recommendation is on the floor about congregational humming for us to be able to sing that or hum that song together rather than sing, or be able to do some other alternatives. Certainly, we do miss being together. People do miss, especially those who are living alone, have talked about the isolation and the loneliness from church family. So we certainly want to encourage a lot of isolation, especially from those who don't have immediate family right around them. But it really does make us ask those questions exactly like that. It's going to look so different for us, especially not being able to hug or connect with people. Is it worth it for us to do it in the same way, especially for gathered worship? Since that can stay online, we have come as a board to the conclusion that for June, that's really the best place for us to keep worship, given all of the constraints. And then we can encourage community and connection and church to thrive in all sorts of other ways. But with the constraints you're talking about with singing and with kids ministry, it's best to keep those online, is where we have really come down on. Those are good, really good questions. Any other comment to that, Pastor Trevin?
Yeah, I would just add, I think we've, it's amazing sort of the online ministry that's taking place. And, a lot of our classes are now on, Sabbath school classes are now on Zoom. And it's been cool to hear the stories about, I think Arthur, with your class, some members that have moved away, they've been able to now join back in Sabbath school. I know, like with our parents' Sabbath school class, normally, we were in and out 45 minutes. We're meeting on Friday nights now, and we're going an hour and a half, 2 hours. We know more about each other than we ever have before, and we're more bonded than we've ever been before. And so it's actually online. I mean, it's not the same. Trust me, we all want to be back in person. We want things to go back to normal. But I think the online has really been, there's been some benefits to it, and I think we've made the best out of it. And I hope that all of you are part of some of these groups, get on Zoom in a Sabbath School group, or have some of these connections, because they've been really valuable for me personally.
Absolutely. What's been really amazing to watch with the Thriving right now is that people are reaching out to friends and to family, and some people that haven't been to church in a very long time are getting reconnected in with community. That's been the part that's been really amazing to me. With people asking, Pastor Trevin, specifically, how is it that they should be gathering outside and online, outside, not online, how they should be gathering online? I think while I disconnected, you might have been talking about this, so that's why I'm hesitating. But for outside, are there things that people should keep in mind?
Yeah, I didn't get too much into detail with that, but I know a lot of people have been asking that, and we do encourage you to sort of stick to these main guidelines. We emailed it out on Flocknote. And sort of applied these principles to sort of smaller gatherings or outdoor gatherings. We still, outdoor is best. We still encourage wearing a face mask, most of the time, if not all the time. Obviously, if you're going to have like a picnic, you can't wear a mask while you're eating. So if you have to take the mask off, just kind of back your chairs up even further than before, just to kind of have that further barrier. We do encourage if you're going to do a picnic, each family brings their own food and not share food, because we're also trying to kind of limit the touching of the same surfaces. And there have been many reports about these early on parties and meals and gatherings where then there was this huge spread from that. And so, you can do a picnic, but kind of everybody brings their own food, keep your distance, sort of limit the, touching of the same surfaces, make sure you've got your bottle of hand sanitizer there, and, reapply regularly. So a lot of the same principles, pretty much apply for an in-person gathering inside as they do for outside, but outside is definitely safer. There's a little more flexibility on the face masks, kind of keep your distance. If you're going to eat, take it off and eat, but, just kind of be extra careful during those times. If you're going for a hike, hey, if you're 10 feet, 15 feet apart, all right, you can take it off for a little bit, but if you're going to be close by to each other, just still encourage having that mask on. It just, helps people, keep people safe, just an extra thing to do to lower the risk. So those are sort of the main things. Not much changes. We still need to be very cautious and very careful.
The Sabbath School online groups have been really great. In-depth discussion, more deep relationship. Yes, definitely, Christina. That's true. Thank you for sharing that. Comment that the church pews may need to be converted to actual chairs to hold a separate seat. Yes, that certainly is why the fellowship hall is such a great space for us to be able to do those socially distanced gatherings. So when we come to that is where we will start, is in our fellowship hall, so that we can have that kind of ability. Yes, Christina, the house churches where people are gathering in homes to watch church together, that's actually the very place that I've been hearing the most inspiring stories about people that haven't been to church in a long time reconnecting. That's where it's happened, is because people are gathering for watch parties. And especially when they're in the same family, they've talked about having family members who haven't been to church in, some of them, 10 years. And now they're watching church every week for 3 months now. So pretty amazing to be able to see that happen, and for people to stay connected by house churches. It's pretty amazing. Since kids don't really get social distancing, especially when seeing friends for the first time in 3 months, when you do open for children's ministry, are you anticipating when we can do that without having to distance the kids? I'm not so concerned for myself, but I worry about the kids in general. Yes, Danette, you bring up a really good point, which is why ministry to minors is looking like it is. We're staying online because my 6-year-old does not know social distance in the same way. He can handle it better than the 2-year-old, though. But you're right. We don't know what the next unfolding phases look like at this point. We're going to have to wait to see. Even in the recent times when people have been gathering together in large groups and there hasn't been a lot of social distancing, what we're hearing is that in the next week to 2 weeks, we're going to really know a lot more about what that's going to look like later on. So we don't know when children's ministries will be reintroduced. The Southeastern Conference is working on that right now, but we won't know that yet at this point. How about still doing Pastor Mike's Sabbath School class online while they clean the church? What do you think? We are definitely keeping Pastor Mike's Sabbath School class online right now. We're keeping, just to recap, if you're just joining in too, the church board decision on Wednesday night means we're keeping everything online for this entire month of June. You can count on the same things, Sabbath school and worship service online. We're encouraging people to gather outside. That means other places as well as on our church campus, in the parking lot, on the lawn. We're also opening up our fellowship hall for organized small groups. If people want to gather, when we have the protocol and the cleaning supplies ready, we are open to that. We'd like you to reach out to us early so that we can start planning on it even before we have the protocol and the supplies. So that's the recap of where we're at. And I really do. I'm so glad that you appreciate Pastor Mike's Sabbath School online. How will we determine who gets to be the first 100? First come, first serve. What about visitors? Great question, Christina. Pastor Trevin, would you start with that one?
Good question. That's part of the challenge of what we're trying to figure out. We have determined, actually what's really nice is, Flock Note's what we use for all of our communication, and they have just added a RSVP system to Flock Note. So whenever we do these gatherings, we'll be using Flock Note. So it'll be familiar for people in order to RSVP. But we have not figured out what that looks like. Part of what we need to determine is how many people can come to a gathering, and then what our space can accommodate, and then how many services we can handle in a weekend, and then sort of make that determination. But I think everybody should expect that probably coming every single week is going to be difficult because that would require, 6 or 7 services in a weekend, which is just not feasible to do right now. So, we're going to have to figure something out, some way to do it. If you have creative ideas, we'd love to hear them. It might be an every other week thing, or, first week of the month is last names A to, F. Second week is, we're just brainstorming. We're just kind of thinking through things. But, the other thing that we sort of have to keep in mind within that 100 is we do have a lot of volunteers that are needed for every service. So it's really not purely 100 people, because by the time we have all our volunteers, our screeners, just the elders, the preacher, the, pastor, the AV people, we kind of are down to about 80. And then, you asked the question about visitors as well. We do want to kind of leave it open for a few walk-in people. So, that's one of those real challenges that I think all the large churches are sort of thinking about and dealing with, and why we're very much in line with the other large churches of kind of holding off on these large in-person gatherings because of how challenging it is going to be logistically.
If you've been around Azure Hills a while, you know how we do bringing certain items for potluck. That's been quite a number of people have texted me and said, the A through D section that would normally bring tomatoes gets to go first Sabbath. The next age alphabetical group gets to go second Sabbath. We all get an in-person gathering once a month. There's all sorts of creative ideas people have been sending our way. Right now, in answer to the question that Ernie just posed, can we have different size groups or groups of 100 on different parts of our campus? And that will really depend. They have talked about that being allowed if we have separate and distinct walkways, entrance and egress, for people to be able to go there and not run into each other. So if there's a separate group of 100, right now, We don't really have an outdoor space that would be able to keep them completely separate from the fellowship hall. So we would need to keep those two as one space right now. But we will see as those numbers potentially change in the future, what we can do with that. It's a really great question. Oh, and Christina, you're pointing out a great point that we are seeking to manage is preserving the energy of the whole team too, while maintaining the online worship. Thank you for pointing that out. That is certainly a consideration as we're trying to navigate these two. We are really hoping to be able to encourage this kind of thriving connection and community that we see happening with people, while at the same time, there are more vulnerable members, elderly members that need to stay online. And so we need the quality to remain the same. That's one part that we've been talking about a lot that you might not have translated, that it does not mean what we do in the sanctuary ends up going online. As you can imagine, someone giving a scripture or making an offering appeal with the mask on would not translate to online very well. You know, like the experience right now online, people can see facial expressions, they can connect. We can even have families singing from their living room because they can sing there. But the worship in the sanctuary will be very different than that and won't translate well to an online experience. So it's certainly been something very important to us, especially for our more vulnerable members. We want to keep the online experience done really well. And having someone preaching with a mask isn't a part of that kind of experience.
Pastor Tara.
Thanks, James. It's true. It is harder now than before. Thank you. It's true. We miss seeing you too, by the way. We really, really do. So it's hard on that front too. Yes, Arthur.
Let's clarify something, though, that Ernie was trying to bring up on the outside gatherings.
Go for it.
There are definitely, even if we were having an in-person service in the fellowship hall, there's plenty of space on our 10 acres that you could easily accommodate another 100-person outdoor group. I'm thinking of the old playground area up by Mount Vernon and City Center Drive. That has a totally separate gate. Cars could park down in that area and they wouldn't cross. You could also probably have a group meeting up in the upper parking lot. And again, you would have, now they'd have to bring their own lawn chairs or blankets to sit on, because we're not going to be moving the brown chairs out to those areas. But there is space that's not immediately adjacent to the fellowship hall area.
We certainly do have space on our campus. Go ahead, Pastor Trevin.
Yeah, no, the key thing is just that if we keep everybody separate, that's sort of the key thing that they've talked about. I think right now they're kind of saying, let's just hold off on even doing that right now. But I think as things progress, if we see that this is going to be in place for a lot longer and that, that 100 is not going to change, then I think they'll start to be more creative, which is where then I think we would move more to a sanctuary gathering. Everybody in the sanctuary parks in the front. They use those restrooms, and then there'd be a gathering either in the back lawn or in the fellowship hall. All those people park in the back. They use the fish pond restrooms, and there's no mingling. And then, like you're saying, Arthur, if it's an outdoor thing, they can be down there, and they're not even no restrooms. There's no crossing at all. That's potential. That's potential to work as well. So just a matter of keeping everybody completely separate. That's the main challenge.
So you can buy your personal fans with those misters, because it will be July by the time we're talking about this for outside. So the more resilient can stay outside, of course. But there are a lot of configurations we're talking about. We want to be able to talk through some more. If you get ideas, we're open to hearing them too. But we certainly are grateful for the understanding that you've been giving as a church, that people recognize it's not easier for us to stay online, and we miss you too. And we're trying to do the best we can within the limits. One of the most frequent questions that I've been getting, that's happened by phone and text and hasn't come up in this stream yet, maybe because I've answered it so many times, but who decides on the 100? And we talked about a little bit that coming June 15th, there's an evaluation of the 21-day period where that could potentially change. But that is a guideline given by the state of California for the limit on the 100-person gathering. And then the second follow-up is, are we just, how does that work for us? Do we just follow every guideline that the state gives us? Now, you might not be one that asks that question, but that is where some go, isn't this a conflict of interest for the church and the state? Some have asked some questions about that. No, for us, it's really not about that. We're trying to do what's best and safest. This is out of care for one another. So this is just a new way for us to care for one another. And we don't believe that the church community is harmed by us caring for each other in regards to protecting each other from illness. But it also is not a time where we are seeing the church languish. The church is not closed. The church is just scattered. And I think that's a really important difference for people to understand, is just because our building is not being used in the same way, it doesn't mean the church isn't alive and well. So I think it's an important difference for us to understand, because some have felt it, are we really losing our freedom here as believers? And I don't believe so. I believe we're making the best possible choices to care for our community. And that's really what this is about. We're following the health procedures because out of care.
Yeah, I'll just speak a little bit more to that. The policies and the sort of our plan is based on both requirements from the state of California, and they've required the 100 limit, and they're reevaluating in 21 days. And then also the requirements from the Southeastern California Conference. And so the Southeastern California Conference has come up with requirements that they expect all the churches to follow, that are requirements that our conference is saying that are not mandated by the state, but that our conference believes are the best practices to keep us safe. They're all based on the state of California, and you've seen CDC and these different groups have made recommendations and ideas, and hey, these are some guidelines, these are recommendations, not necessarily requirements. And so what Southeastern has done is said, these are the things that we really feel like our churches need to do in order to keep everybody safe. And so if you watch online or you see news stories about churches gathering and maybe you don't see them all wearing face masks, well, that's because that's not a full requirement in every county in the state of California, but Southeastern California Conference has made that a requirement for the sisterhood of churches we are part of. And so we are following that. And so it's a mixture of both state regulations and then also Southeastern California Conference requirements of what they're wanting all the churches to do. And really it's about everything that all of these practices, all the guidelines we're doing minimizes the risk. And so, we could, if we did face masks, but not 6 foot distancing, well, that'd be good. It would minimize the risk to a degree. If we do both, it minimizes that much more. If we add in wash your hands regularly, if we add in screening, if we add in, entry and exit points, and if we add in, limiting touching of services, disinfecting everything, the chance of exposure and of spread just dramatically drops every single thing that we do. And so that's what we're trying to do. And right now, our approach is a very strict approach. It's a very restricted approach. The conference has taken a very strong approach with this, and I appreciate it. I agree with it. And then as time goes by, as we see what happens in the country, are things spiking? How are things going? What are we learning more about the virus? Hopefully they will gradually be eased, and then things will get a little bit more normal as the weeks and as the months go by.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. This is what I love about Azure Hills Church, I have to say. Look at all of this conversation, connection, community. Look at this fantastic kind of giant umbrellas. Are you ready for those? Are you ready for evening services, sundown Friday, sundown Saturday, all of these different wonderful ideas, sunrise, sunset services. Thank you so much for that kind of creativity and connection. So from Xandra, how does our church perform baptism for those who want to be baptized? This is a really great question. in our pastors meeting with Southeastern California Conference, we actually have approval to go ahead with baptisms now. So that is a really exciting thing. We'll have to see where we actually had baptisms scheduled for March 14, the Sabbath that we had our big pandemic hit, and we closed everything down. All of the churches in Southeastern closed down for that March 14th Sabbath. It will really depend on the individuals, because outdoor baptisms are a great practice that have happened for a long time together. So we'll just take it candidate by candidate, but certainly baptisms are a part of what is allowed for right now. Speaking of church building, I know some community groups meet here. Has there been a loss of income because they have not been able to meet? Great question. We have one group that this falls into this category. Pastor Trevin, would you speak to that one group?
Yeah, so we do have a lot of community groups that meet in the church. Our general philosophy is we do not charge for community groups to meet in our building. And so there has not been a big loss of income based on less groups having their meetings here. The one exception is the rec center, and that's a community center that they have classes for all ages, but a lot focused on youth, music, and exercise, and science, and drama and art, all kinds of stuff. It's a really great program. They meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they received grant money from the city of Grand Terrace, and so some of that has to be used for rent, and so we do receive that amount. It's about $600 a month. So we would, lose that. But I've just been actually emailing with her today or yesterday about they're kind of looking at things and trying to see when they might be able to come back, and sort of exploring some of those options as we're getting closer to the school year. So I'm not worried about the loss of income. I'm worried about all these great community groups that do good in our community not being able to meet and having challenges with that. And I'm more concerned about, a loss of great ministry and great meetings taking place than I am about some income. But they're finding creative ways to work around it.
Yeah, I love what they're doing online this summer too. Thank you so much, Liesl, for the comment. I'm grateful for the pastoral staff. Thank you. We appreciate each one of the affirmative statements that have been shared. Thank you so much. It's interesting that most of the churches, or many of the churches that start off, don't have a baptismal pool like ours. I remember on my tour of Azure Hills Church when I was out interviewing 4 years ago, it was, wow, this baptism pool is really a pool. You can fit 5, 6, 7 people in this pool, but a lot of the other places, like especially when you start churches or when you're baptizing folks in other countries, like when I've baptized overseas on evangelistic meetings, you baptize in some really, wherever there's water, you can do a baptism. So we've set up inflatable kids pools, and we've done it in water troughs for animals. We've done baptisms in some really different places, rivers, lakes, you name it. So baptisms can take place in a lot of places, and we could even see, setting up an inflatable or portable baptism. We can see setting that up for outside. It would be just like these parade graduations or drive-by graduations. It's the most memorable. I got baptized here. You mean inside? No, here, this parking space. This is where I got baptized, where, back in 2020, that year that everything happened. Yeah, we could see doing some creative things like that too, I'm sure.
So, Pastor Tara, I haven't mentioned this to you, but our can you hear me? So
yes, go ahead.
Okay. So our pastor's Sabbath school class came up with a great baptism idea using a dunk tank. What do you think?
That's fantastic.
Then it's no touch. The pastor just presses the button and they go down and they're baptized. What do you think? Theologically, is that okay?
I don't know. Actually, some places have you just kneel down. So, it's not much difference, the dunk tank. It's hilarious. Any other thoughts or questions or comments or questions that you have We can go ahead and give a couple more minutes. Dunk tank baptism. We might have some rebaptisms desired with that, Pastor Trevin, if that idea holds, because it's so unique. Okay, Ernie loves it too.
I saw a couple of people posted about sort of the air ventilation and needing to make sure that was strong. Yeah, we're looking at all those things, just a lot of facility upgrades and issues that we're kind of looking at to try and get prepared for this. Working towards switching over our restrooms to touchless, so that the faucets, the soap dispensers, paper towels, like we're working towards doing some of those things. So a lot of logistics we're working through, and we've made an order with our custodial company, and every day we're getting some stuff. Like we just got some hand sanitizer in today that had been back ordered for a few weeks. So we're excited every time something new comes. So the stuff is starting to flow in, but there are a lot of facility logistic issues and just supply issues that we're working through to get everything ready for us to meet again. So we're working hard, but it's tough to get everything in order for it.
I never thought I'd feel excitement when the cleaning supply truck rolls up, but I actually feel like it might be Christmas when that big blue truck rolls up, because I know we're getting something that we might need to meet together in person. So kid you not, there's some excitement when that comes up. This question, the touchless, yes, that is exactly what Pastor Trevin just referred to. Danette's question, I will have to be able to talk with people more offline, but I'm going to acknowledge your question here too. Do you have permission for baby dedications too? Some have asked that, especially for outside or smaller gatherings. We'll be able to talk through those on a case-by-case basis, especially when we're not doing these large in-person gatherings. Some have wanted to do more of a backyard experience with family, and we can take those on a case-by-case basis. I'm looking for any other questions that you have. I love to see this is what makes our church so special, is exactly this kind of fun back and forth right here. Thank you for that. I will ignore some of those and let you two talk offline, but I don't see any other questions right now at this time. We really just, first of all, thank you so much for joining in tonight. Thank you for your dedication and devotion as a church. To be able to see this kind of significant connection happening in the midst of such strange and unprecedented times has been fantastic. To see people pulling together, to see faithfulness in giving to the church remain constant. Those are just some of the things that we thank God for, because it's been so incredible to see the strength of this church revealed. And I still hold on to and believe that some of the shifts that have happened during this time that have reoriented families or individuals have been super important, that God is bringing more good out of this. So we're really still praying for that. June 29th, if you're just joining on, June 29th will be the next time our church board reevaluates in light of the things that we'll hear from the state of California and from Southeastern California Conference. We will reevaluate what it looks like for next steps, and then we'll keep you updated for in-person gatherings. But until then, we'll stay online. We'll encourage outside gathering with masks and distancing. We'll encourage people to get together and to connect in ways that are safe. And then if you have desire to be in our fellowship hall, to have a small group there, you can reach out to Pastor Trevin, and we would be happy to coordinate that as our protocol and our cleaning come online so that we can accommodate you. So please reach out to us. Let us know if you know of a baptism that is desired right now, or a baby dedication or funeral, then you can just reach out to us and we can work on those. Oh,
Pastor
thank you so
Tara.
much for the comments about this event. Yes, go ahead, Arthur.
Don't forget to remind everybody.
We don't have you do the audio. Okay, there you go.
Don't forget to remind everybody that Sunday afternoon we have our first official outdoor event to celebrate our graduates at 4:30, and they can come and drive through the parking lot and wish our graduates well.
Yes, thank you for the reminder. It is 5:30 on Sunday, the 14th. We're going to have a drive-through graduation event.
Yeah.
So the celebration in the church parking lot, enter in by the Children's Center or the fire station on Mount Vernon Avenue. And
Mm-mm.
oh, that's what I was just told today. We just welcome you to come to the church and we'll direct you as we get there.
Come
We're
in
going to
on
just
Barton
go
Road.
according to,
If you-
okay.
I hope they come in on Barton Road, because if we do have any traffic, I don't want to block the firehouse.
Okay. Drive-through graduation on Sunday at 5:30 is going to be a great celebration. So please come out, where it's going to be a really fun event. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're really glad to be able to see all the connection happening, and we're so grateful for you. We thank God for you. Have a wonderful evening.